Good morning, folks. This is Brother Allen with Bible Commentary. We are still commenting on the book of Revelation as we work our way through it. We are now in Division 2, and we are commenting on the opening of the seven seals. Now, in the first seal, I'm going to reread that and explain it. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as with a voice of thunder, "Come." And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now, some folks try to say that this is Jesus Christ coming back at the end of time on a white horse, but that is incorrect, because this horse is before the wars and the famines and all the rest of Revelation. So this is in reference to the Emperor Vespasian and his son Titus and the Roman armies, who would, at the very end of the Jewish wars, would surround Jerusalem with 80,000 soldiers. So let's put it in its historical perspective. But let's move on to the second seal. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. That is more properly translated as the land of Palestine and not the whole world. That they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Folks, this is also in reference to that the blood shed during those Jewish wars would be up to the bridle of a horse, because there was much bloodshed in the land. I'm going to read to you in a few minutes some historical records by the Jewish historian Josephus that records how many were actually killed and the wars that were taking place. But let's move and recap the third seal. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come," and I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard as it were a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A measure of wheat for a denarius, and 3 measures of barley for a denarius, and see thou not hurt the oil and the wine." This black horse, my friends, represents famine. There was great famine in the land for the Jewish people, not for Rome, not for the Roman soldiers, but the Jewish people, and many of them just flat out starved to death. Also, inside the walls of Jerusalem, since no one could get in to bring food and no one could get out unless the Roman army killed them, they began to starve to death. They began to turn on each other. They began to dig food out of bodies. Josephus reports that they even cooked and ate their children. They were so hungry. So this symbol here of this black horse, and it is a symbol, is of great famine in the land. And we have to understand that that's what that is. Now, I'm going to read the fourth seal. That's our focus today, is the fourth seal. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." And I looked, and a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the land, the earth, to kill with the sword, and with famine, and with death, and by the beast of the earth. So here is the fourth horse, who is pale, and the proper translation of death and hell here, the word hell is the grave, because so many were dying. Lots of them were being buried, but most of them were being thrown out of the city over the walls, and they were being burned up in Gehenna, or the dump outside of Jerusalem. But let me read to you some of the wars that were going on at that time, according to Josephus. There were many wars. In AD 40, there was a war in Mesopotamia, causing the deaths of 50,000 people. In AD 49, there was war in Jerusalem, resulting in the deaths of approximately 20,000 people. At Caesarea, wars between the Jews and others resulted in 20,000 deaths. The Syrians killed over 20,000 people. At Scythopolis, over 13,000 were killed. At Alexandria, over 50,000 killed. At Damascus, over 10,000 were killed in an hour's time. Wars were in Galilee, Syria, and east of Eden. Judea was in revolt against Rome. Armies of Spain, Gaul, Germany, Illyricum, and Syria converged upon Italy to decide who should succeed Nero. Jews were fighting Jews. Jews were fighting Romans. The whole land of Palestine, Israel, was a land of war. Finally, in April of AD 70, Titus, the son of Vespasian, besieged Jerusalem with 80,000 men and utterly destroyed its inhabitants and the city. During the siege and the destruction of Jerusalem alone, there were over 100,000 Jews killed. In all, during the Jewish wars, approximately 1,300,000 Jews were killed, according to the Jewish historian Josephus. At the same time, during this period, there was a great persecution of Christians by the Jews and by the Emperor Nero. The book of Acts tells of the many who were persecuted and killed because of their faith in Jesus Christ. Stephen was stoned to death. John was beheaded. James was stoned to death. The Jews hunted down Christians and either killed them or turned them over to the Romans. Nero especially enjoyed killing Christians in the most terrible ways. He would impale them on stakes and pour oil on them and burn them alive. He would dress them in animal skins and put them in with wild beasts to be torn and maimed until dead. He would rape the men and the women in his evil degeneracy. Christians were delivered up to much tribulation. They were starved to death, beaten, murdered, raped, whipped in fire, ripped to shreds by wild animals, and crucified like the Savior that they worshipped. This was all done because the Christians refused to recognize Caesar, Nero Caesar, the beast of Revelation, the man of sin, the son of perdition, as God. So when we're looking here at this fourth beast, this pale horse represents the many that are dead. And I want to read some more from Josephus. The scene here is evidently the same, only with all the horrors and the misery of the war intensified. The ghastly specters of death and Hades now follow the train of famine and war. The four sore judgments of God, which Ezekiel saw commissioned to destroy the land of Israel, the sword, the famine, and the noisome beast, and the pestilence are again let loose upon the land. And by them, the fourth part of its population is doomed to perish. Never was there such a glut of mortality as in the war, which terminated in the siege and the capture of Jerusalem. The best commentary on this passage is to be found in the records of Josephus, as the following description will show. All egress being now interpreted, every hope of safety to the Jews was utterly cut off, and famine with distended jaws was devouring the people by houses and families. Their roofs were filled with women and babes in the last stage, the streets with old men already dead, children and youth swollen up, huddled together like specters in the marketplaces, and fell down whenever the pangs of death seized them. To enter their relations, they were themselves affected and had no strength, and those still in health and vigor were deterred by the multitude of the death and by the uncertainty that hung over them. For many expired while burying others, and many repaired to the cemeteries ere the fatal hour should arrive upon them. Amid these calamities, there was neither lamentation nor wailing. Famine overpowered the emotions. With dry eyes and gaping mouths, the slowly dying gazed on those who had gone to their rest before them. Profound silence reigned through the city, and a night pregnant with death and the firebrands, more dreadful still than these. For bursting open the houses, as they would a grave, they plundered the dead and dragging off the coverings from the bodies, departed with laughter. They even tried the points of their swords in the carcasses, and to prove the temper of their blades would run through them, some of those who were stretched, still breathing on the ground. Others who employed them to lend them their hand and sword, they abandoned disdainfully to the famine. They all expired, with their eyes intently fixed on the temple, averting them from the insurgents whom they left alive. These, at first, finding the stench of the bodies insupportable, ordered that they should be buried at the public expense. But afterwards, when unequal to the task, they threw them from the walls into the ravines below. But why need I enter into any partial details of their calamities when Manius, the son of Lazarus, who at this period took refuge with Titus, declared from the 14th of the month, Xanthicus, the day on which the Romans encamped before the walls until the new moon of Panemus, there were carried through the one gate which had been entrusted to him 115,880 dead bodies. This multitude was all of the poorer class, nor had he undertaken the charge himself, but having been entrusted with the distribution of the public fund, he was obliged to keep count. The remainder were buried with their relatives. The interment, however, consisted merely in bringing them forth and casting them out of the city. After him, many of the higher ranks escaped, and they brought word that full 600,000 of the humbler class had been thrown out through the gates. Of the others, it was impossible to ascertain the number. They stated, moreover, that when they had no longer strength to carry out the poor, they piled the carcasses in the largest house and shut them up, and that a measure of wheat had been sold for a talent, and that still later, when it was no longer possible to gather herbs, the city being walled round, some were reduced to such distress that they searched the sewers and the stale odor of cattle and ate the refuse. And what they would formerly have turned away from with disgust then became food. That is in the book by Josephus, The Jewish War, book number 5, chapter 12 and 8. I'm going to stop there with that seal, folks. And I was reading to you from Josephus about how many dead bodies were in and around Jerusalem. That is why that Jesus spoke that their bodies would be thrown in hell or Gehenna and would be burned alive, and the worm would not cease eating those dead bodies. This was what Jesus was referring to, because there were so many bodies laying around everywhere, young, old, babies, men and women, that they couldn't keep up with burning them, so just started throwing them outside the city into the sewers and Gehenna. Folks, this is the last part of the fourth seal. We will begin with the fifth seal next time. I hope you're beginning to understand the symbolism that is in the book of Revelation, and also that the historical facts written down in history books actually help us to interpret this book. So until next time, this is Brother Allen. May God bless.